Why do you earn? Why do you save? The simple answer is to fulfill your aspirations in life. If you are starting from scratch, you'll invariably focus on your needs first, whether it is to put a roof on your head or to educate your child. But as you progress, you won't even think about it. You'll move naturally to satisfy your wants next. A bigger house, a car, and loads of pretty things. But someday, if you've not already had that thought, you'll find yourself thinking that you want to do more. You've reached a point when you think that you might have enough. That's usually when people think about giving, of philanthropy. It's often thought of as something that only the wealthy do. But should that be the case? Can you take up philanthropy in whatever small form that you can afford? When do you start and where do you start? This is Moneywise on NDTV Profit, and my name is Alex Mathew. My guests today are Neera Nundy, the co-founder and partner at Dasra, and Radha Goenka, director of the RPG Foundation and founder of Pehlay Akshar, which is and also the Heritage Project. I should ask you more about the things that you do, but the idea that I had to bring you on today, ladies, and thank you so much for taking the time, is to find out whether you can start small. You see these headlines of people and foundations giving and the crores and crores of rupees that go out. And I wanted somebody who does this to understand where the genesis of your giving began, and somebody who facilitates this to identify what are the causes that you can get to. So first, let's talk about how things stand in India specifically with regard to philanthropy. How big is this giving that is currently taking place? What are the numbers?
So it's been difficult in India to actually get the numbers of how, and we sort of say generous, how generous are we as a society? But to be honest, we are giving, but the ultimate givers has ended up being the government in terms of providing sort of public services. But just to speak to, giving is a spectrum. And so it's not just the wealthy, and, you know, Radha should definitely speak to her perspective, but I think we're a generous society and over years have been giving. And we're seeing the next generation actually starting to give even more, even a younger group that's willing to give out of their salaries, or even when you see during COVID, how much we were supporting, you know, each other. I think it's very difficult to capture all of that, but private philanthropy, only 5% honestly is given by individuals, families, and CSR, and 95% is government.
Wow, 95% is government. Okay, so obviously your name tells me where you're from, and I think a lot of my audience will understand that as well. But you would have had a genesis point for the giving that you do. So tell me a little bit of the causes that you try to support right now, and when did you start?
So honestly, thank you for having me, first of all, Alex. And you know, like you said, that most people think of giving as something that's and thing you think of, you know, later in your life, probably when you retire, or you know, at a much later point. And I think I was at that point of privilege where, you know, as a young 24-year-old, I had the option to even consider to devote my life to giving, you know, early on. So I view my position as a position of privilege. And so when I came in to looking at philanthropy, I was very mindful of the fact that I had come in with a good education and had, you know, luckily had that, and then access to capital to, you know, put into this space. So I came in with looking at it with the perspective that where is the highest need? Are there areas in society that are ignored? Because like Neera said, 95% is government. So what is that 5% that I can you know, use my capital for, you know, in that space? And, you know, I really structured all my giving. It's almost like I viewed it as an innovation fund, because that's where government funding was not very, you know, big in. And so I seeded a couple of NGOs over my last 20 years now. And each of them kind of fill in that kind of gap in society where no one really existed. And I tried to build models where we're innovating and then, you know, partnering with government, because that's the only way you can really scale them. And so that was my journey.
Okay, and what were some of these NGOs that you seeded in that? I'm not asking you about the names, I'm asking you about what do they do?
So the first one was in the English education space. And again, you know, English is one subject that is not very politically popular, and rightfully so. And I personally am a big proponent of education happening in regional languages because I think people actually learn the best if you teach them in their mother tongue. So if they have to learn a math or a science, they should learn it in their mother tongue. But English is an enabler where it opens the internet up, the global marketplace up. And so English is essential. So we actually focus on English as a second language, which is ESL, which is globally how non-English speaking countries teach English. So we built a curriculum that's focused on ESL principles but contextualized to Indian content. And that's what I mean by a space that government wasn't really looking at, and we felt had a huge multiplier effect in the impact it could have in a person's life. So we built that, and then of course we've been in partnership with BMC now for the last 15 years, and we are teaching, training. All of BMC's teachers are under our training program, which is under Pehlay Akshar. So that, was the first NGO I seeded. The second one was in the heritage space. Again, I think there is a lot of India has a beautiful heritage and a lot of heritage sites, and there isn't enough funding to go towards heritage sites because we are a developing country and a lot of government's resources go on people over places. And we wanted to build a scalable solution. So rather than focusing on restoration, we focus on preserving heritage sites through storytelling, and truly that's the purpose of history, that we can learn from our mistakes.
Sure.
So that was, so we piloted with Worli Kolivada, and are now looking at Sivri Fort as a project. A lot of our projects are Bombay focused. The third one is in the environment space called NatureRe, and there we have urban and rural. In the urban space, we have created a small urban forest in Mumbai called Nest. And the idea is that Bombay actually has Sanjay Gandhi National Park, which is a forest that the city's inherited, which is really the best thing that could happen, that we have. And because we have a forest, it's actually a thriving ecosystem, and it has the ability to regulate climate. So if we create enough of those kind of forests with the same flora, fauna, as in the same trees that are native to this land, we can actually create stepping stone habitats for the birds and butterflies to fly and multiply in these stepping stone habitats. And if we create enough of them, we could have the same impact of a forest for our whole city. It would solve our AQI issues. So we piloted with one forest like that.
It's so amazing that you spend so much time thinking about each of these things that you've done.
She's super enlightened.
Yeah, exactly, right? But then I don't want to sound condescending when I say this, but is it that you need to be a little bit enlightened when you think about what you want to do with your money beyond your immediate surroundings, right? Does it need that? And I must put that caveat out. I'm not trying to be condescending here.
Yeah, I think you do need to be enlightened. Ironically, Dasra actually means enlightened giving. So I think enlightened, we try to be more strategic about how your giving is, and to really think about the impact, think about the results. So one gives, but one typically gives based on their values, their beliefs, something you're passionate about, and not to take away from that, but it's a journey. So you start there, but I think over time you start to think about results and holding accountable, because you want your money to have greater impact. And so that's where you start to have a journey where you realize there's only so much. See, the problem with philanthropy is it's not going to solve the problem. So it's going to need to innovate, like she was saying, around it. It needs to be able to take risk. And so with that, you need to start thinking about how is that going to achieve scale. I mean, a country like India, you're going to have to reach millions, and think about how you reach millions if you really want to make a dent. And so you'll see typically philanthropy move into education first. I mean, education and health are the two most favorable or most popular sectors that philanthropy kind of moves into, the third being kind of disaster in the moment when all of that happens. And so there's nothing wrong with that, but that's also where you need to leverage government systems to really kind of achieve scale.
So how do you, so how does that happen right now? When you, so is it PPP? Do NGOs tie up with the government to set up schools? Does the funding get routed through certain bodies that then set up certain schools, or is it existing infrastructure that gets supported through giving?
So I think it's a combination of probably all that you've said, right? So I think in Radha's case, they've actually created a program, an organization, and implementing themselves, but you'll have other nonprofits and NGOs that are doing work, let's say, in government systems or even outside government systems that you can support, or you can even go directly, right? So you can have the different steps through it. I mean, I think the challenge for us as a country is to be institutionalizing this kind of change. So yes, you can do it individually and disaggregate it, but it's a very fragmented market, if you want to call it, right? Our NGO sector has a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of duplication. There's a lot of inefficiencies. There's a number out there that we have 3 million NGOs in the country. So to be able to even navigate that, and obviously a percentage of that are actually organizations.
But that's exactly what you hear, right? If you start giving, invariably you will get a call from 3 other NGOs saying, hey, you know what, can you help us out as well? And so what you're saying is something that I think a lot of people will have heard, that it is disaggregated. But explain why this diffusement of giving is not achieving maybe the purpose that it should, right?
I mean, the sector needs to be a bit more organized, but it's difficult to organize where, what are you measuring? See, markets and the for-profit sector is easy. In some ways, you're all being held accountable to a bottom line. Over here, being able to measure impact, right, over the kind of time frame that we have, we're all not measuring the same thing. See, quality of education, we were able to actually start to be able to measure when Pratham came out with the USR. So some structured way, standardized way of being able to measure performance in our sector is impact. And we don't have that. But you're starting to see the education emerge with some of that, health emerge with some of that. So as these fields become a little bit more sophisticated in some ways, you'll be able to do that. It's also because it's people's passion projects. I mean, look at people who start these kinds of organizations, call them social entrepreneurs. It's a different mindset and a different kind of organization that a lot of these build, and it starts with sort of that purpose and that belief that then as you start to think about what does it take to scale these organizations, and that's really where we came in. We said, how do you start to work with NGOs for them to think about the boring stuff like talent and systems and technology and things like that. And so as a philanthropist takes their journey, NGOs also have their own organizational journey, and we don't have that many large, successful, scaled organizations in the country because people are also not giving to build these kinds of organizations. It gets kind of diffused.
What do you think, and you mentioned right at the start that you were able to start giving, some part of that was driven by privilege. And this is an opinion that a lot of people have, that, okay, you know what, they have enough money, let them give. I need to take care of my own requirements. But then the question that I have is, can you start small and can you have big impact? I'm sure that you've interacted with a lot of people over the course of the last 20 years that you've been doing this. But do you know people that start out small?
So honestly, if you look at my own journey, I don't think I've given a lot really in terms of financial, contribution, but I have given a lot in terms of time.
Time. Okay.
And I think that's the best thing you can give. So that doesn't, your bank balance really doesn't, factor in, but it's the amount of time. And I think, I mean, I don't know, Neera, you know better, but I think my biggest contribution has been my time, more than...
It's been both.
I don't think I've really, I mean, there are people who've given way more than I have. So I don't think the amount is, and with that parameter, I think everyone should give, because if you can give your time, that's what the sector needs more than, I mean, money, like we said, 95% is government funding anyways.
Right.
So really time is what, I think more people need to actually, volunteer and get involved with things, because when people do something with passion, I think the impact of that is just incredible.
It's incredible. Okay, so talk about some of the things that people can look at, right? You've mentioned education and healthcare, but you've also said that you start with that. You can go far beyond that to create an impact. So talk about a few of the other innovative ways in which philanthropy can be directed smartly.
So I think that the big shift really comes from when one's not thinking about like, where is every rupee going, right? And is it going? So a lot of the mindset ends up being like, is that rupee going specifically to feed the child, for food? Or is it specifically going for books and education? Without recognizing all that it takes, all the infrastructure that it takes to actually deliver these kinds of services, and are you willing to pay for it? Like a business, right? It costs to have people, to have these systems. So I think to have that kind of mindset where you're willing to give flexible funding, I think can help these organizations be a lot more strategic. Just like in the for-profit sector, when folks get equity, then you build organizations, right, based on that. Similarly, in our sector, we need a lot more flexible funding. We need a lot more long-term funding. The struggle is CSR is year to year, right? And so it's very difficult to be able to plan this kind of impact and growth to be able to achieve scale on a year-to-year kind of model. So much more longer term funding. I think these are the kinds of things that can be helpful, and to start to think about what are the results, what are the outcomes that we're actually looking for, and the fourth thing would be like, can we bring this ecosystem together and be much more collaborative? I mean, it's easy to say, let's collaborate, but I think there's so many different stakeholders one needs to be able to bring together to ultimately sort of achieve this change, that it's not just about your money. It can be about the influence. It can be about your ability to bring people together, to have conversations, to have learning, to really think about things like data.
But, so what I'm trying to get is, and this program reaches a lot of individuals that make money decisions. And so they will look at conversations on this program, and they will think about strategy that they can employ to improve their own wealth creation journeys. So what I'm trying to get through my conversation with you is to help them think of how they can maybe either give their time, as you've pointed out, or give their money to causes that they might find useful. So if you describe the way that these things might work, and some of the work that is currently being done, then that's something that they would find beneficial. So what are the kind of things that can be done beyond education and healthcare?
Oh, so there's lots of different sectors, right, that one can fund to, all the way from like gender-based violence to sports for development. We're seeing a lot of interest even like in arts and culture starting to emerge, in mental health. So that's why I say that it's not the sector first. I mean, although we're saying it's your time, you have to learn to give, like write a check. It's like a muscle in the part of your brain that no matter how much you're making, if some percentage you're able to give, I think being able to develop that kind of generosity is really important.
That I agree with. I think just start somewhere, and do it with both the money and the time. So, find an initiative that you're passionate about and commit to it. So yeah, I think that's a
And
good
it can start with find an organization. So there's no shortage of organizations to be able to give to, and engage with the organization. So I think as you engage, because I mean, everybody who's watching the show probably is a smart person, right? Who comes with a set of skills. These organizations are looking for board members. These organizations are looking for, what does it take to grow? So if you come from a talent background, if you come from a finance background, can you support them think about their unit costs? So there's skills that you can apply that you engage with the organization.
It's not volunteering. It's not standing in line and giving food, or it's not helping out.
It could be that too. It depends on what the organization needs. But going out with that mindset and going and asking them that, how can I help you? It goes a long way. I want to just add to that, because I've had volunteers who've come in, but then they don't stick with the commitment that they make. So that again is important. Like today, if you're committing to going and teaching in a school, at a particular time, you go and do it. Not that I'm going to come, but then not show up. So I think that's also something that if somebody's thinking of giving, that whatever you commit to, you have to be committed to it. So whether it's time or money.
And okay, so Dasra obviously is a facilitator, right? You help organizations that need access to capital and to people. You facilitate that.
Yeah.
But ordinarily, for my average viewer who's trying to find the right place where they want to go and speak and they want to make an impact, how would they normally do this?
I mean, there are ways online. I would say start in your community. Typically in your own area, there will be organizations that are doing some good work, all the way from people who are picking up your garbage to folks who are coming, even working in your homes, to be honest. So it's very close to you, and you probably don't realize it. Ask around. But at the same time, you can go online. I mean, there's The Give, there's a bunch of different platforms that you can access organizations, but then that becomes very transactional. So I think, yes, you can start with the transaction and start learning. So I think the journey needs to be about learning, and it needs to be about being in partnership. Some of the challenge becomes when you're volunteering that you somehow feel you're doing the organization a favor. And it's not easy, right, for the organizations to accommodate, frankly, our kind of talent. They don't even know what to do with it. So I think to be patient, to be a listener, and to engage with the communities as well. So you can stay with the organization, but ultimately the greatest satisfaction, I have to admit, is when you really see the difference, or you're able to be with the communities that these organizations are working for.
So from the perspective of somebody who wants to do this full time, right? And increasingly, even on this program, I'm getting comments from people saying, look, I've done enough, or they've achieved a certain amount of wealth, right? And after a point, their wealth is creating wealth for them, and so they're comfortable with that, and they want to do more. So the question that often is asked is, if you have this fire moment, as it is called, and you've retired early and you've stopped working, what do you do with your time? Suppose somebody wants to do something like this. What kind of perspective can you give to them? Can they find a place that gives them enough that they can keep the meter ticking, and not have to eat into their long-term savings? What is the perspective that you would give to somebody like that?
I think I'm probably going to sound repetitive again, but I think, think about what you really do feel passionate about. And, I think if you're in a position of having access to capital, you're in a real privileged position, because, like we started off saying, that innovation capital, because most people, when they fund, when the CSR funding, they want to fund to existing organizations that are already of a certain size because of compliance, their own reasons. Very few actually want to fund something really innovative or something new, unrestricted capital, as it's called. So if you have that, you're already starting at a very privileged position in this sector where, you have access to some kind of money. Then I'd say connect with what connects with you. Think about a cause that you, because then you're giving your time and not just the money, but you're actually thinking about how can I actually solve this problem. So I think that mindset is...
but you can do this full time, you're saying?
100%. I mean, we were just talking about how, and I feel like I always have less time. So
it's been changing. I think that a little bit of what you've portrayed, that somehow it's later in life when, you have a liquidity event or you're retired, that's when, people start to do philanthropy. I think it's changing. I think it's moving towards a younger generation. We see families who they want their children to be involved and exposed, and how can they be engaged. So I think we're seeing a whole other generation that actually doesn't want the regular jobs, or is not wanting to go into banking like graduates, right?
And give me examples. Tell me about some.
We have 200 people in our organization.
Right.
Our average age is 27.
Right.
I mean, people are coming from all kinds of backgrounds. I mean, I came from investment banking, but we've got now that people are coming from being educated in all kinds of backgrounds that they could have had, if one says, like a regular corporate job. But they choose because there is a generation that is now motivated by purpose. And it is wealthy families, next generation, that is actually motivated by purpose. And so you see this generation asking parents, asking grandparents, are we going to do something? And can we get involved? And I think people are having dinner table conversations, if one can say that, around, okay, if we did have a pot of money, and giving children that kind of access and saying, okay, now think about a project that you want to be able to do. And it's being valued in the sector, right? Even if you see business schools, you even see how people are hiring. Being engaged in community and service and having some purpose, I think is becoming a mainstream, if I can
also
say.
I think the 2% law has really changed things, because now there's so much more money in the sector. So I think in a lot of ways, for all the criticism that law gets, I think it's actually fantastic, because it's just brought more money to the impact side.
For those that are unaware of that, you want to take us through?
So of course, the government came out with a law that 2% of company profits must go towards CSR, which is towards the impact side. And it's filled with a lot of compliance-related caveats, that it has to be of a certain kind, a certain way spent in a certain time. And some of that has become a big burden for the impact side, because small NGOs struggle with trying to kind of meet the compliance. But in a big picture sense, it's just brought more money into the impact side, which is why we are able to, have organizations with 100 people strength on the impact side. And so I think, like Neera said, the entire landscape is now changing. We have a lot of people who are opting into making impact their, career.
On that note, thank you so much for taking the time. Pleasure having both of you on the program. And hopefully, we've given you something to think about this end of the year season. It is close to Christmas, and it's usually when people think of giving. Maybe you can make a difference. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is NDTV Profit.